Guys, welcome back to the vlog. You read that right. No, we're not in Vegas. It is 88 at 10:30 in the morning on the East Coast. So it is a hot weekend, weekend before 4th of July. I figured we're gonna have a lot of fun with drinks, friends, you know, not playing much poker. So I wanted to get some poker in before the festivities started. So we're here at Parks and we'll get a couple hours in and see how it goes. PLO game, relatively short session. I played for about 2 hours. Let's go over some hands here. This first hand, I have Jack, 10-10 with one suit. I'm under the gun, and I decide to bump it up. 2 callers, and the big blind 3 bets to 40. I don't think I have much of a decision here, given we're about 400 effective. I flick in the call, as do the other 2 players. Flop comes King Jack 8 with 2 hearts. Big blind actually checks this time, and I think if you had a set of kings here, given the flush draw and the straight draws on board, I think you would bet. So I feel free to bet here, and I decide to bet 100. Put some pressure on the flush draws and the straight draws and the combo draws and stuff like that. I think a king and side cards are going to call a lot of the time, and I think I can get a lot of value here. So I throw in 100. And under the gun +1, flat calls. Button folds, and the big blind also calls, which is pretty surprising, but you know, not totally unexpected. Turn is another king, and big blind checks again. At this point, I don't think anybody has me beat. The under the gun +1 could have King 8, but I'm blocking King Jack. And I just don't see them having pocket kings or anything like that. I think, given that the under the gun +1 player is now short stacked, she only has about $65 left. I think the play is to check here, because I think she is going to check a lot of her hands. I think the big blind has a lot of kings, and I don't want him to check call this deep and let him play essentially perfect on rivers. So what I do is I decide to check it. And as expected, under the gun +1 jams it for 65. Big blind thinks about it for a second and calls. And again, I continue with my plan, and I check raise all in to about 210 total, so about 150 more. Big blind thinks about it for a second and folds. And I thought the under the gun +1 either had a king or she was drawing dead, and it turns out she was drawing dead. She has to run it twice, and I said okay, but she was on Queen 10, 9, and she had a straight draw. So scoop a nice little pot there. This next hand is pretty interesting, I thought, so let me know what you guys think. So in the big blind, there is a player that has been 3-betting a ton. Saw him 3-bet Ace-Jack 4-9 with all clubs. I saw him 3-bet 4-8 Jack 9 double suited. So he's 3-betting a wide range of hands, and his 3-bet frequency is pretty high, especially when it's a squeeze opportunity and there's a couple callers in the middle. So in this hand, middle position raises to $10. I look down at ace-ace, 5-8, single suit, 3 hearts, and I decide to flat for the reasons I want to back raise later player. 2 other players call, and sadly the big blind folds here, so we're off to see a flop 4 ways. Flop is pretty good, I would say. It is ace, ace, queen, rainbow, so I flop quads, and I don't think I'm going to get any action at this point. But now's the time to see what I can do and maximize my value here. So flop checks around, and the turn is a 6. Early position checks. The initial raiser decides to bet 25, and I don't see any reason for raising here. He could be bluffing. If he does have an underboat like queens, I don't want to scare him off here, and I want my hand to look like a naked ace or some kind of draw here. So maybe a wrap type hand given the flop check through. So I just flat call 25 and folds around, obviously. So we're off to see a river. River is an offsuit 10, so there's no flush draws on board. King Jack Broadway gets there, but that's about it. And at this point, the initial raiser checks to me, and now it's up to me to decide how much to bet. Now this player's fairly good. I think if I pot it, he's not going to pay me off with any full house, given my hand looks like calling an ace XXX or a full house that already got there on the turn. The only way I think I can get paid here is to size way down, and that's what I do. I bet 30. He thinks for a second and flicks in a call and shows pocket 6s for a turn full house. But he said much more than that, and I wasn't getting paid, and I didn't think I was getting paid much more than that either, given I had everything crippled. When I go 30 here, I can value bet thin with King Jack. So win a nice little pot there. Could have been bigger given the fish was in the big blind, but he didn't come along. Interesting hand here. I decide to raise to $12 with 10, 10, 7, 8 double suited in late position. Button calls and 3 other players call, so we're off to see a flop. Flop is 7, 6 deuce, heart club diamond, so it's rainbow, but I have 2 backdoor flush draws, and checks to me, and I decide to bet 45. Given I have a gut shot to the nuts, I have an overcard, a block top set, backdoor flush draws. There's a lot of cards I can continue on. To my surprise, one of the blinds raises to, one of the limpers raises to 175 with about 200 behind. And at this point, I think this is a decision here. I think he has a lot of straight draws, a lot of hands like 5, 8, 9, maybe 8, 9, 10, which I'm blocking a ton of. And if he does have one of those hands, I am blocking 2 10s here. So if he does have a hand like 7, 8, 9 for a pair and a straight draw, I'm blocking those. And given I block top set, I don't really think there's much else I can do here. I don't think he's raising a set on this board, given how dry it is. So I decide to jam it all in. And he thinks about it for a second and relatively quickly calls. I ask if he wants to run it more than once. He says no, well, he only runs it one time. And he turns over 6, 7, 8 jack. So he had no draws and just naked top 2 pair. And my 10, 10, 7, 8 does fairly well against this hand. So I scoop it on a river 10. So he wasn't too thrilled. He called me a fish. He berated me for a little bit, but I don't think the call is that bad given his range is a ton of straight draws, 1 pair plus draw type hands, and he doesn't have too many nutted hands in his range. So I think it's fine, but let me know what you guys think if I really just dunk this off. All right, I ended the session in for 300, out for about 900. So I booked a $600 win here, and it's a good start to the second half of the year, and getting closer to this goal. Alright guys, so I was really interested in that last hand. I wanted to know how good or bad or okay my rejam was against this player's range. And I threw the results up on the screen here, and what I thought was pretty interesting. So against his exact hand, I was about 45% to win outright and 7% to tie. So I definitely had enough equity to make the rejam here and not fold to his bet. But what was interesting is against his entire range, I am actually a slight favorite. Now I guess I was a little biased here, only putting one of the quote-unquote nutted hands in here, but I also put very strong hands that are going to re-raise and get it in, such as wraps or pair plus straight draw type hands, which, like I said, I either block or dominate. So I think my jam was good. The one hand I do have trouble with is against the set. I put middle set in here because I blocked top set, but like I said, it could be set of twos, all very similar hands here. So even against the worst case scenario, I'm 30%, which is not great, but given the other hands in the range, I think I have more than enough equity to stack off here. If there's a hand I should be considering that I don't have on here, let me know. Now again, these are the hands that he is check raising, getting it in with. Hands like naked one pair or a hand like naked kings, I don't think is going to check raise on this flop and get it in, though it wouldn't be terrible. Against my calling range, against a check raise, I think naked kings don't have enough equity. So I think this is kind of sums up his possible hand ranges and various equities against here. You can see that the majority of the hands, such as pair plus straight draws, pairs and overcards, wraps, I all have 50% or more equity against those hands. So keep that in mind when you're evaluating situations, that you're not just looking at the opponent's one specific hand, but how your hand does against his entire range of hands. And I hope that's a good tip for you guys.